Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our Ask the Experts session today, May 31st, where we are going to focus a bit on leveraging SAP BRIM to create highly integrated models for consumption and usage-based scenarios. We've been talking about this theme for a while. Unfortunately today, fortunately, we have Sunil Gantella with us today. Sunil, welcome.
Thank you, John.
And unfortunately, our other two folks had a conflict. One is sick with COVID. The other one has a customer conflict, so can't join. But Sunil, we're going to dive into some of these subjects on our own and talk through these because I think they're very interesting for folks. So we'll go ahead and dive into some of those and talk about your experience in these areas, and we'll do another one of these following up with the other members of the team. So just as a reminder, the folks who were going to join us, this is going to be recorded, so we will record this, so feel free to come check it out, share with others, ask questions throughout the session if you have any questions for Sunil on here or myself. And then we do have other webinars, add the other Ask the Expert sessions, so I encourage you to check those out as well. As I said, we've been exploring this topic for a while now. And again, as always, you can contact us and check us out in all of these different places, whether it's through our website at bramasol.com, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Apple iTunes. Check those out, and of course, head on over to YouTube, where we have, oh goodness, probably almost 200 different videos about the subjects that we cover in our space. So with that in mind, just a reminder of why we're here. We're here because of what we call the digital solutions economy and how that's affecting companies globally as we move away from selling a box or selling something one time, or in software perspective, selling a perpetual license to selling something as a service, anything as a service. And we see this more and more in many different industries, and it's driving different models. And we've talked about different models, a standard subscription model, we all know about that. But today we're going to focus heavily in, with Sunil's help, around some of the implications for RAR and companies as we look at these usage or consumption-based models. And as I think of usage and consumption-based models, Sunil, I think it's the basic way I think about them, and maybe you can comment on them, is one of them is a pay up front and you use it, and then the other one is you use it and then I pay you in arrears. That's kind of usage versus consumption, right?
That's true, John. I mean, there are different business models and different customers use them a different way. In a media industry, for example, say pay-per-view is where you're buying the service upfront and then you are consuming it at a later date. I mean, you are given, for example, let's say you purchase a movie to watch and you are given 30 days to watch that. So you are consuming that service within that time period of 30 days. It could happen on day 1 or day 20 or day 30. There are a lot of the other, a lot of customers or companies fall in the other model where you are billing for usage in arrears, where customer has used the service, and depending on the amount of units consumed during that usage period, you are billing the customer in that billing cycle. Typically, the recurring fee is billed in advance and usage fee is billed in arrears, so you are billing them together. Based on customer bill cycle dates, be it a monthly billing, quarterly billing, or annual billing, whatever may be that billing frequency.
Exactly, and what's interesting to me is, of course, to make it simple, we can think of it as the old days of telephony when you had a baseline subscription fee or baseline line fee, and then you paid per minute, and that was always paid. You got the service and then you paid in arrears, right? So that's kind of that model, right?
Yep.
So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we explored during our lead ups to this. And one of them is this idea of billing and invoicing only for the used quantity. and wherein you offer the product or service for a fixed fee. And when we think of that, certainly we think of um, again, media, telco, publishing is a great space when you think of this as to, you pay a fixed fee for access to a website or to content, and then you pay based on the use of that content. And of course, that has certain implications when it comes to the billing, invoicing, and reconciling that billing and invoicing with revenue accounting, right?
Yes, and imaging solutions, where I was heavily involved earlier, is also one of the areas where managed print services customers use the BRIM solution, where usage is billed using the BRIM solution.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And from your perspective, as you've worked on a few of these projects, what are some of the challenges that customers are facing with this data, right? You have this issue of pre-calculating, let's say, the revenue recognition part of it, but yet you have to reconcile that with the actual billing. What have you been seeing out there, and what are some of the things they need to face?
Yeah, so there are, again, as I said earlier, there are different models. First and foremost, we need to look at what are the different systems involved in a BRIM model in this kind of a situation. Whenever we talk of usage, the role of mediation is very important, the role of mediation and charging. So these are the two systems apart from the regular the invoicing, where the S/4HANA system, where you perform the convergent invoicing. But these two additional systems are tightly integrated, and they play a crucial role. So first and foremost is how you define your performance obligations, how you define your RA contracts. So all that setup, assuming that they're all in place, then how do you capture this usage information? So the usage information from whatever maybe your external system, which is capturing that consumption data. That consumption data needs to flow into the mediation system in the first place, and the mediation system will use that data and transform it to whatever is needed for SAP to create the SIT, what we call as a consumption item, and then the bit, so that we need to charge it. The beauty of convergent charging is it supports such complex rating models, where you may have to rate based on tiers, you might have aggregates, you might have allowances. So this particular tool helps to take care of that in a big way. So with that said, these different systems or tools which are available in building the overall solution is one thing which customers have to understand. The next thing is, like, as you pointed out, what are the different models and the challenges which they come up with. So let's take a very simple example, which I mentioned earlier, a PPV service in a media industry, pay-per-view service, where you buy something and you have to consume that over a period of 30 days. You can utilize it whenever you want. Now, do we need a mediation system there? Do we need a charging system there? Obviously not, because it's a pretty straightforward case, right? You just need to come to capture that event of the customer consuming that service. And some of those don't even require that kind of a consumption event coming in, because for example, you purchase a service, a pay-per-view service, like viewing the French Open over the two-week duration, or maybe the French Open semifinals and finals. You only buy that particular service, and these can be treated as time-based performance obligations also, because you could just say that it starts on this particular day, ends on a particular day, and you could recognize whatever the revenue over that duration. So a lot of these simple cases, you don't need any complex systems like mediation or the charging system. But the other business models where the consumption units are running into hundreds and thousands, that is where you can leverage these two systems in a fantastic way, and to get whatever we need as the end output result. So the external systems can send this event to mediation, and then mediation can do whatever is needed to do the consumption item generation, and then it sends to the rating system to do the rating. So typically what happens, the challenge, to talk a little bit about the challenges is this. So in a normal scenario, your bill cycles are like, let's say, uh, uh, 10th of every month. So in that scenario, you are typically capturing the consumption, the usage data for that customer from whatever was the last usage information you had from the last month till, let's say, 10th of last month till 9th of current month, right? That's what you're going to bill. If it's a monthly billing cycle, you're going to bill that on the 10th of every month. So this usage data is received right at the time of the bill cycle dates, and then you are billing the customer. So this all looks good from a convergent invoicing standpoint and a customer invoicing standpoint. But from a revenue recognition standpoint, the challenge comes up because you cannot wait till 10th of the month to recognize revenue. You want the usage information before the period ends. So on 30th of the month or 31st of the month, whatever may be the end of that month, you need the information coming in from this external systems, whichever is capturing the consumption information. You need that information to flow into the mediation at the end of the month. So that's a crucial thing which customers who plan to implement RAR, who plan to implement BRIM solutions have to focus on, like, how do I get this information at the end of the month? Now,
Right.
saying that is so easy, like, okay, you get information in two parts, one till the end of the month, so 10th of last month till 30th of last month, assuming 30th is the month end date, and then 1st of month till 9th of current month, right? If you are able to get this in two parts, then it's easy to recognize revenue, because once you create a billable item, then you know, based on the consumption data, you are creating a fulfillment drive, because that's how you set up your performance obligations in RAR. And you are able to recognize revenue irrespective of your bill cycles, but you need definitely have these consumption information. So that's the challenge. Now it's easy to say, but a lot of places, you know, it's not that easy to get that information. Like some of these places where you may have to, there's a person who is physically going to each unit to, or each device to calculate to capture the usage information, to capture the meter reads. You know, for example, our utility services. I have an electricity meter, and if it's an automated electricity meter, the usage is captured every day. It's online. But if it's still a manual meter, then somebody is visiting my house during the bill cycle date, whatever it may be, and he's capturing that particular meter read and feeding it into the system. Only then it is available. And in those situations, you cannot just simply say that I need one meter read at the end of the month, once again at the bill cycle date. So there are practical challenges there too. So in those cases, one of the options where I was involved in implementing this solution was that we create the fulfillment information based on the historical averages. You know, you can look at how customer has been utilizing the consumption data over the past few months, and use that. You could say that past 3 months, past 6 months is up to the business model, you know, and then decide on how you want to what model you want to use to generate that average consumption data, and use that to create a fulfillment. And the problem with this, I mean, this is one way of recognizing revenue, so that you are able to generate a fulfillment right at the month end to be able to recognize revenue for that particular month. And then invoice can happen 10th of the month in this example. Right. And now the additional challenge which comes up is, you are not recognizing revenue based on actual usage. You are now recognizing revenue based on a average usage. So there's a deviation between the actual usage and the usage you have used for fulfilling the revenue. So the challenge which comes up additionally is the true up now. You need to true up your fulfilled quantities with your actual usage quantities, which is your invoiced quantities. So again, that's something which can be built, but again, how often you want to do that is another factor. Like, do you want to do it right before a year end? What are those crucial points, when you want to do these true ups? Year end, or do you want to do it right midway through the term or end of the term? Obviously, at the end of the term, we definitely want to do the true up, but somewhere in between, whether you want to true up, you have to decide on those. So those are the challenges which I say. Apart from other issues like capturing this information, right? The usage information, how you capture that, those are other issues. But from an RAR standpoint, what I'm trying to highlight is from a revenue recognition standpoint, you have these challenges, especially with usage.
Right, and then you, of course, and we'll jump to the next one, but you have to, the purpose of the mediation and the focus on the mediation also is from an RAR perspective. There's the concept of the contract and the contract with the customer, and defining everything that fits within that contract, quote unquote, or that bucket, and how do you associate them if they're all coming in, and mediation is one way for you to do that. And you mentioned this, the idea of we talked about these idea of hybrid event-based models, where consumption might trigger certain events as well, right?
Yeah, so this is the model where, one is the consumption is triggering a fulfillment for you. So you set up your POB type as event-based consumption, and then whenever a billable item is created in the S4 HANA system, it is triggering a fulfillment try, so that the fulfillment is triggered on that particular performance obligation. Alternatively, in the example which I mentioned earlier, where you are not able to get this information at the end of the month end, and you are creating a manual fulfillment, you are creating a fulfillment try yourself, right? So in these cases, you are not triggering your fulfillment off of the actual usage. So the bit itself is not creating the fulfillment try for you. We don't want that to trigger a fulfillment in those cases. So you are using a POB type which is set up as event-based, but a manual fulfillment. So you are creating a fulfillment based on a historical average, right? So that becomes another model where a manual fulfillment try. So you treat it as event-based manual, and that is triggering the fulfillment on that performance obligation. So you could use those models.
When you say manual, of course, I always go to people who talk about manual journal, where you're physically making a journal entry.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're talking about here? A manual, and somebody's
that's a good question.
intervening?
Especially with BRIM, we are talking high volume, and when you are talking high volume, and if somebody is telling you, hey, you have to do this manually, I know it scares everyone. So yeah, I did not specify on that. Manual really doesn't mean that somebody is manually going and updating this. So in an environment where you have very few performance obligations like this, where you create it as a manual fulfillment, yes, the option SAP, the standard option provided by SAP is to go and manually update the fulfillment based on whatever is the percentage, let's say, or based on the quantities. You can go and update that. But for a high volume business, it is impossible for us to do that. So the solution is that you have a custom program created, and this custom program is looking at all those provider contracts which are active, all the active provider contracts in that month, and which are basically usage provider contracts. And for all these usage based provider contracts which have this manual setup, it is gonna create all the fulfillment rise automatically, systematically. This program will create it, but it has to create it saying that it's event-based manual. So ultimately, there's a fulfillment rise, which gets processed and updates the fulfillment progress on the performance obligation. It's not a person manually going in to the system in the user interface and updating it. It's rather a program creating a fulfillment drive with that tagged as event-based manual, which in turn is updating the performance obligations fulfillment progress.
So it's an automatic trigger, and you can use, whether it's a manual program. There's probably ways, and you identify some of them through the use of the tools up front, like BRF Plus, right? So that you can automate and simplify everything, as opposed to some systems where you actually do have to do this manually, right?
Exactly. So system uses the CAFI item type for this, write type for this, and system creates a standard API, right? And we are leveraging the usage of that API, a create a fulfillment try API. And essentially what we are doing in this custom program is to call that API to generate a fulfillment try with event-based, event type as event-based, I mean, fulfillment type as event-based and event type as manual, so that the RAI gets created, and then the rest of the thing is standard SAP. Again, your processing of the RAIs and update of the contract is all standard SAP programs. There's nothing custom there. Just the creation of the RAI itself is the custom piece, where you can build whatever logic you may want to have, whether you want to look at historical averages or flatline a specific average every month. You can decide how you want to do that.
Yep, and you can, and by creating some statistical tools, much like we do with SSP, for example, where you can do a monthly running average, or maybe it's a quarterly where you revisit that and you can use statistical averages. So, certainly we've done that. We can do that. So with a few minutes left, we have the activation of services, deactivation of service or products, or suspension. Those can be really challenging because there are a number of different issues that we've discussed and we've seen, right? Activation and deactivation.
Yes, you are absolutely.
The proactive versus, maybe you can talk about the prospective versus retrospective, and then of course suspension's an interesting one as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge topic in itself. We would need again another 30 minutes to just talk about this, but I'll try to be as concise as I can. Activation of a service, of course, it's standard. When the service starts, you set up your contracts, everything falls in place. Deactivation, again, is a standard process. A contract at the end of the term is deactivated naturally, or it gets extended depending on how you set it up. But at the end of the term, most of them do not automatically renew. Or you could have models where you automatically renew, but whenever they are not renewing, there's nothing there to do. But deactivation in between the term is where you are terminating. Customer is specifically asking for terminating the service. For example, in media, you subscribe to a particular channel, and then you are not happy, and then you request for terminating the service, right? So in those cases, how that happens and how it impacts revenue, how it impacts the performance obligation, this is all needs to be taken care of. The other point of suspension of a service, suspension of a service is where you are billing the customer. There's a fixed fee, say a recurring fee being billed every month to the customer, and there's also a usage fee being billed to the customer, and customer says is not using that particular device, let's say, where usage is being captured, and he's not using that device for a couple of months, and customer has requested suspension of service for those 2 months. So there are companies, I did not see a lot, but there are companies which may treat this as a cancellation and start a new contract after the 2 months, or a lot of companies, suspend service for those 2 months. So when you are suspending the service, obviously there is no usage because customer is not using the device. So there is no usage information flowing in. Now, what happens to the fixed fee which is being billed? So typically fixed fee is billed via billing plan to the customer. So you could have a billing block set up for those months in which you don't want to bill the customer, and that will all take care of making sure that you are not billing the customer. But if your fixed fee is set up as a time-based POB, then you will have challenges in these cases, because even though you are not creating an invoice to the customer, you can still recognize revenue because it is set up as a time-based performance obligation. So in that case, again, I would caution, if we are trying to work through a lot of things and try to handle even those kind of scenarios also to stop that from being recognized, I would simply say that's too much of work for too little of revenue impact. So if we can talk to the auditors and explain why we don't want to do it in those cases, that would be a better solution rather trying to build a solution, an IT solution around it. Or instead of looking at it as a time-based POB, you could even treat it as an event-based POB, and then you don't create a bit for that particular month in which the suspension service is suspended, so you don't recognize anything in those months. And
that's a great idea. Yep.
So there are different things. I mean, we'll have to look at the business model, and again, some of those things which we cannot build in the system are difficult to build in the system, it's better that I have seen this in multiple scenarios where having the accounting team talking to the audit team, coming up with reasons as to why this cannot be built and explain the impact of overall impact of revenue. That goes a long way in helping build a better solution.
Right. And it's so important, and you bring this up because you talked about, we talk about how in projects it's so important to keep the revenue accounting and the rev rec up front as you're building out these new products, services, business
Exactly.
models, because when you get downstream, sometimes, maybe it's too late, or something that could have been simple up front now becomes extremely complex. I mean, another one, we hear about often, think about this, right, is if I've changed the terms of, I've got a device, I've got maintenance, and I've got the service plan, along with some consumption base, let's say, now I suspend the service, even the fixed fee in the service. What does that mean for the allocation that we did in step 4, right? How did you reallocate, and how do you want to visit that? So many of these have so many different implications. I love your idea of, well, why don't you just make it event based, and then you don't, you can avoid that. But again, that's going to have implications as you think about, what that means. So, Sunil, thank you so much. It's great as always to speak with you. I think we're going to wrap up. We've gotten to the bottom, to our half hour here. Just a reminder of Bramasol, and we are an SAP partner. We sell and deliver against the order to cash world. We have we believe that SAP BRIM combined with SAP RAR is the most powerful complete solution for companies doing this order to cash, quote to cash model. And you really need to think about it up front. We have the deep expertise, as you've heard from Sunil and other meetings. Our expertise are here to help you, and we're here to help you across all different models and all different areas. So Sunil, again, I so much appreciate all of your support and the time you spent on this. Look forward to speaking with you in further Ask the Expert sessions.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, and thank you everybody for joining and listening in. Hopefully you learned something. I know I always do when I get on these meetings. So we look forward to seeing all of you on the next meeting. Make it a great day.